So this is my presentation of the theatre styles, context and audience awareness. So we're going to be talking about Mother Courage by Bertolt Brecht, The Caretaker by Harold Pinter and Fences by August Wilson. Mother Courage, to start off with, was written during the 30 Years' War in Europe, and it's about a woman who has 3 children and she makes her profit from just a cart that she pulls around with her that her and her children live off, and she makes money by selling things such as loaves of bread to troops and soldiers on the battlefield during the war. Brecht wrote it when he was evacuated from Sweden during the eve of the Second World War when Germany invaded Poland. So some themes in the play is the division between the upper and lower class. So the upper class, because they were more wealthy, thought that they had power over the lower class, but the lower class actually brought in most of the wealth. So if they realised like what they were doing for the society, then they'd have a lot more power. And the character Catherine brings in the themes of innocence and rule and order and power, because she's like a very quiet but kind character, Mother Courage's daughter, and she uses her voice against the society because she dies a heroic death. And even though you think the troops and soldiers have the power in the society, she actually uses just her one voice against them, which shows the power that one voice can have. So, social context for Mother Courage. It was set during the 30 Years' War when the Catholics and Protestants were fighting in order to find out who would govern Europe. And then at the time it was written, Brecht was writing the piece at the end of World War II after he had left Germany. So political context and historical context of the piece, the Catholics and Protestants were still fighting, but they didn't know who would have the land, so during this time it was the 30 Years' War, and that's kind of what they were doing. And then at the time it was written, the Second World War was coming to an end and the Great Depression had started, so there was like a large drop in economic value in the USA, and then it had spread to Sweden. So economic context. At the time it was set, there was a big difference in economy between the rich and the poor. It wasn't just like a small difference in what they had. And at the time it was written, the Great Depression had spread from the USA to Sweden, so the exports that were coming in had dropped because they didn't have enough money to bring them in. So the country was going into quite a decline. So The Caretaker is the next play by Harold Pinter, and that is set in Hackney in East London in the 1950s. And that's about a tramp and 2 brothers and their views and differences, and it all takes place in one room. Some themes and issues in this play are isolation. So the characters, the 2 brothers and the tramp, are all quite isolated from each other emotionally, and also the 3 characters together are isolated from society because they keep themselves in the one room. They don't let themselves out to the world. And another theme is race and origin, because Davies, who's the tramp, is a racist man, but Aston and Mick, the 2 brothers, aren't, so there's quite a bit of tension in that area. And absurdity is also another theme in this, because in this type of theatre and in this play especially, there's no connection between the different scenes. so they could, like, you could start watching the play at any time and it would make sense. So there's nothing from scene to scene that connects it. It's just like it goes around in a big circle. So social context of the caretaker. So it's at the time it was set, it was in London, and at this time there was still like a sense of World War II lingering, because there was demolished houses and vacant bomb sites that had been used and not much had started being rebuilt. And at the time it was written, this was the first decade that teenagers were given the freedom to make their own decisions, as they weren't sent to war by demand. They could disagree if they wanted to. So political and historical context. At the time it was set, Labour had won the general election, so they were so like the Labour leader was the Prime Minister. And then at the time it was written, the Conservatives took over, but not long after the Labour Party started having the power again. And between the 1950s and 60s, there was a plan to move factories and people out of London, because there was about 10 million people as the population, and it was very busy and there wasn't enough jobs for everyone, so there was a lot of homelessness, and factories didn't have enough money being given to them to run. So economical context. At the time it was set, Britain was able to catch up on the debt from World War II because they'd spent so much, and they became a world leader in some high-tech industries such as air travel, motor car and aerospace. And at the time it was written, until the 1960s Britain was in the trading company, but after this they moved to a different trading company that allowed free trade between countries that are in Europe. So the next play is Fences by August Wilson. This play shows the African American struggle in the 1950s in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in USA, and it tells this struggle through a man who betrays people because of how his father brought him up, so he's treating other people how he was treated when he was growing up. The main theme in this play is betrayal. So Troy is the main character in this, and he betrays everyone in the play except himself, so such as his wife, his children, his best friend. Race is also a theme in this play because coloured people, black people had started being treated better, but they had a long way to go to have like equal treatment to white people. And there's also a theme that's almost a question of what is masculinity, because Troy treats his children how his father treated him, and that's not kind of how they should be treated. So at the time it was set, there was not very good treatment towards African Americans in Pittsburgh, and also at the time it was written, there was the civil rights movement before this, so they had a lot better treatment. And politically, John F. Kennedy, the president, was assassinated during the time it was set, but at the time it was written, because there'd been the civil rights movement, there wasn't as much discrimination. In the early 1950s, when it was set, there was a rise in prices for everything, but at the time it was written, there was an economical growth after a deep recession. So Mother Courage compares to Fences because that was set in the 30 Years' War, but Fences was in the late 1950s and it was in Pittsburgh. Fences is like the caretaker because they're in the same decade, however they are set in different places. And Mother Courage and the caretaker both have a sense of power struggle, but they are set in different countries. So styles of theatre: epic theatre, naturalistic theatre and absurdist theatre. Epic theatre is a form of didactic drama that avoids the usual illusion, and it was created so that the audience doesn't have an emotional attachment to the characters and they just can think about the morals in the story. And it has some features like a lack of character names, captions, some props, but not much costume or set design. Absurdist theatre can be defined as the human situation is essentially absurd. So the point of this was to give the message that there's no meaning behind life itself. Naturalistic theatre is attempting to make a perfect illusion of reality through drama and theatrical strategies, and it's created to try and replicate the illusion of reality that already exists. And there are some comparisons on the board between these types of theatre. Pantomimes, musical theatre and medieval theatre. So pantomimes are primarily based on entertaining children in these basic language so the children can understand, but innuendo so that the adults can keep engaged. And they have things such as bright costumes and comedy so that the audience is always interested. Musical theatre combines songs and dance to tell a story, and it's quite stylistic and uses physical theatre techniques. The songs, dances, props, costumes, set it all engages the audience because it's bright and it's usually quite fun and keeps them engaged. Immersive theatre is one of the most interactive types of theatre, so it often includes the audience in the piece by having to answer questions or make decisions, or like the characters on stage can ask the audience to do anything.